switch. We will go to another part of the world. We will move from Korea to Canada, Vancouver, and Mr. Stephen Pearce will explain us how a very well-known resort, a skiing resort, which is Whistler, and a city very well-known, which is Vancouver, they do cross-marketing, and how do they have synergies, in order to promote their visits. Mr. Stevenson, I'm going to do it in Catalan now, because he knows very well already his CV. Stephen ha treballat amb empreses públiques i privades a tot Canadà. Des de l'any 2011 treballa a Turisme de Vancouver, on actualment és vicepresident de viatges, lleure i màrqueting digital. Les seves responsabilitats inclouen el màrqueting de consum, viatges de negocis, màrqueting digital, investigació, tecnologia i recerca. Coordina més de 11 mercats geogràfics arreu del món. També Mr. Stephen ha presidit el Comitè Assessor d'Investigació de la Comissió de Turisme de Canadà durant més de 7 anys i actualment exerceix en el Comitè de Mercats Emergents. És també el president de Capital VC del Consell Empresarial Canadà-Xina i membre de la Junta del PATA. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Jordi. I think I'm going to step out here. I feel more comfortable than behind the lectern. So let's see if we can get our slides going. Okay. So I work with an organization called Tourism Vancouver, and I'd like to thank, first of all, the Congress. Jordi, thank you for your kind remarks. I'd like to thank the Congress for inviting me here to Andorra and the opportunity to speak here. And this is a first for me to see this beautiful country, and it's pretty amazing in the short time I've been here. I work with an organization called Tourism Vancouver, and we're an independent, not-for-profit organization. We're responsible for marketing the city of Vancouver. We've been around in one way or the other since 1909. We're the second oldest city marketing organization in North America. And in case you're wondering, the oldest is actually in San Francisco. Our organization is about 60 people. We have 150 volunteers that actually work with us in the information center here. They volunteer their time. And if you looked at our visitors, we focus on overnight visitors. And the reason we focus on overnight is for two reasons. One is because the bulk of our funding for marketing, international marketing, comes from our hotel community, number one. Number two, that's where the yield comes from. So if you get somebody to stay overnight in your city, you have an opportunity to turn that one night into 2 nights, into 3 nights. You have an opportunity for them to do more than just stay in a hotel, spend in attractions, entertainment, and recreation, and so on. So it's a high-yield visitor that we're focusing on. We get many, many day trippers to Vancouver, but our focus is really on overnight visitors. And if I took a cross-section of all the people that stayed in our hotels, it's rather interesting. 40% of them are Canadian. 20% of them are American. And the other 40% come from a whole slew of international markets. So that's good news and bad news. The good news is that we have a number of different diverse markets that we can turn to when other markets are not performing for us. The bad news is that we have to be firing on a number of cylinders simultaneously, and we have to be careful not to spread our resources too thin. So realistically, we have campaigns at any point in time in 11 geographic markets. And what I want to do today is talk a little bit about how we work with Tourism Whistler in terms of cross-marketing. And I thought I'd talk a little bit about context, and then I'm going to get into a specific example, which is China. I thought you might be interested in terms of what we're doing together in China, and perhaps more importantly, why are we working together in China? Okay, we were doing so well. There we are. So this is Vancouver. For those of you that don't know Vancouver, it's the 3rd most populated city in Canada. It's the most densely populated city in Canada because of its geography. The city core itself is about 600,000 people. The metropolitan area is about 2.4 million people. And this is probably something you don't know. It's located in the most northerly situated rainforest in the world. There's a temperate rainforest that Vancouver is almost in the middle of that goes up to Alaska. And anybody who's been there knows that we get lots of precipitation, particularly during the winter months. We don't call it rain, we call it liquid sunshine, but we're marketers, so we're allowed to do that. The other thing about Vancouver that you may not be aware of is it's very ethnically diverse. Over 50% of the population has a mother tongue other than English, which is interesting. We've been described as the most Asian city outside of Asia. Now, perhaps you understand why I'm going to be focused on China later on in my remarks. We have our own mountains. We have Grouse, Seymour, and Cypress, our local mountains, but the scale is very different. The base of Grouse Mountain is about 270 meters, and it goes up to 1,200 meters. Now, by comparison, the resort municipality of Whistler is a community of about 10,000 people. Their organization, Tourism Whistler, our marketing partner, has been around since 1979. Whistler is at a base elevation of about 670 meters, and their mountains go up to about 2,500 meters. So very different physiography, or very different environment, very different climate as well. This is sort of the stereotypical picture of Whistler. If people know anything at all about Whistler, it's probably because they're skiers. So by any number of measures, Whistler is probably the largest ski resort destination in North America. It's certainly the largest by about 50% compared to its closest competitor. It used to have the highest vertical until 2009. It's got the highest lift capacity of any other resort in North America. And there's the peak-to-peak gondola that connects the two main mountains, which is, I think it's the highest and it's the longest gondola of its kind in the world, which is pretty exciting. So Whistler is on the map from a winter perspective. It's a very strong, very compelling winter destination. There we go. So these are the typical pictures that we see of Whistler. Very strong, very striking winter images, lots of action around ski, snowboard, alpine activities. But it's also increasingly a very popular summer destination. Hiking, kayaking, we've heard a lot about this, mountain biking. Interesting, mountain biking, which has really gotten appeal in Whistler, comes to a head every August when we have the Crankwork Festival. And this year we're going to see 150,000 people that are going to be at that festival. It's over a 10-day period. But the thing to remember is that it's 10 years. It's been 10 years since it's been operating. The first year that it operated, you could probably put all the participants and the audience in this room. So it's taken 10 years of commitment, it's taken 10 years of stamina, and you've had to have the champion who's prepared to actually work to make sure and see it through the difficult times as well as its successes. And now it's really reaching its stride as an internationally renowned festival on its own right. So again, a geographic perspective, Canada, British Columbia is on the west coast. There's Vancouver, there's Whistler. This is probably a better map. And let's see, I brought a prop because I found it's difficult just about halfway up the room to really see the slides. There we go. So this is Vancouver. And you drive up here. This is called the Sea-to-Sky Highway. And half of that highway is along the coast. And then you're starting to move inland towards Whistler. So the Sea-to-Sky Highway, very picturesque highway. It's been described as one of the prettiest highways in North America. You can also get there by a train. This is a privately operated train company that operates just during the summer. And of course, there's other options, whether it's helicopter or a small plane to get to Whistler. This is Vancouver's breakdown overnight visitation. This is a year, January through to December. This is actually our 2012. But you can see the seasonality in Vancouver. We've got a very, very strong summer season. This is July and August. And you see where our need periods are. Our need periods, obviously during the winter months. This is Whistler. Whistler has got two modes. Obviously very strong in the wintertime, here and here, and increasingly strong in the summertime. Now the scale is very different. When you put the two of them side by side, here are the Whistler numbers down here, and here are the Vancouver numbers. So we get about 8 million overnight visitors a year to Vancouver. Whistler sees about 1 million over the course of the year as well. They get many more on a day trip basis, about 1 million overnight visitors. Come on, stick with me. I've pressed it about 4 times, so I'm probably 4 slides ahead of where I should be. Oh, here we are. This is the point, so this is in order, that's great. So this is the point I wanted to make here. Whistler's you're seeing increasingly 2 modes. You're seeing the winter and you're seeing the summer. But without question, the yield for Whistler is in the winter months, because that's how it's positioned. It's positioned first and foremost as an alpine destination, as a ski destination. So the rooms, the properties can charge premium rates during the wintertime. By comparison, because of our seasonality, our hotels charge crime rates during the wintertime or during the summertime. There's a lot of compression. There's very little options for people when it comes to our summer months. So you can get a great room deal in Vancouver in the wintertime. You can get a great room deal in Whistler in the summertime. And it's interesting. Now, we're only 2 hours away. I don't know if you noticed on that short slide I showed you. 120-odd kilometers, 2 hours. And they're only really 1 hour inland. But that makes all the difference. Look at snowfall. I mentioned we get precipitation in the form of rain, but in terms of snow, this is Whistler. These are centimeters, so 100 centimeters in January, 100 centimeters in December. And this is Vancouver, that small little line at the bottom here. And you look at daily mean temperature, and again, this is Vancouver. We tend to be a little warmer in the winter and the summer. In the wintertime, Whistler gets the sub-zero temperatures they need, which is great for snow production. As a Vancouver resident, this is a perfect winter day for us. The snow is up in the mountains where it belongs, and it's not on the streets. And I don't have to worry about shoveling it, which is the most important. So it's not uncommon in Vancouver to be able to ski, to be able to golf, to be able to sail on the same day. And visitors to Vancouver are often surprised when they see our blossoms, our crocuses, and our lilies coming up in February, when much of the rest of Canada is covered in snow. The Olympics really crystallized the opportunity for Vancouver and Whistler to work together. We've been collaborating on initiatives over the past several years, but the Olympics really drew international attention to the proximity of the two communities. Whistler got the designation, I believe, host mountain resort by the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, and that's the first time that designation was awarded to any community. We obviously formed a number of fronts in terms of collaboration, trade, consumer marketing, research, media, but our trade partners, and this is the interesting thing, this is the legacy of the Olympics. Our trade partners saw a spike of interest in terms of their customers who are now looking not only at Vancouver, but looking at Whistler. So we are creating more of a sex appeal, for want of a better choice of words, because of the combination of the two destinations. The other thing that happened in terms of legacies is that the route to Whistler, the highway, was improved. So what was usually about a 2.5 to 2 3/4 hour drive turned into about a 2-hour drive. And that's driving at the speed limit, which is wonderful. There's other legacies as well, but that was an important legacy for us because it made it a little easier to package the two destinations. Principles of building a relationship. Obviously, you have to have an objective in terms of the right type of customer. Who do we have in common that we want to devote our resources and energies towards trying to compete for? The second thing is obviously a focus in terms of the campaign. How are we going to measure results? What kind of timing are we looking at? What kinds of investments are we prepared to make together? How are we really going to collaborate? Risk. Risk is a two-sided sword. On the one hand, we're underwriting one another's risk because they're using their dollars to help underwrite the cost, the investment of my dollars from Vancouver's perspective. But you're only as good as your partner. So you're also putting your brand at stake to the degree that their brand suffers an erosion of one kind or another. So again, that's something you've got to be careful with. The most important element in all of this is trust. You've got to have one another's back. You've got to be respectful of the relationship. You've got to be respectful of one another's intentions and their interests. And there's a certain humility there. The tendency is to say there's one right answer. The reality is that you've got to find sometimes a second or third right answer that keeps your partners happy. I titled this presentation, Friends and Partners. And realistically, you cannot be an effective business partner unless you're friends. You've got to build a personal relationship first before you build a business relationship second. These are just some examples. Now I'm going to make a point. I'm going to show you some examples and I'll make a point. This is sort of the stereotypical positioning working with Whistler. They're a hook for us in the wintertime. So we pull business through Vancouver to Whistler because of the ski product, and we see pre or post. So Myers is an important trade partner for us in Germany. I want to go through these quickly. Here's an example of Canadian Affair and how Whistler and Vancouver are positioned in the United Kingdom, both in the tube as well as the paper piece. First Class Holidays in the United Kingdom, they're now focusing on the summertime with Whistler excursions from Vancouver. Australia, you're not going to see any of the small print, but you will in the slides. Perhaps that gets shared later on. But again, Whistler and Vancouver being positioned together. Destination Canada and Australia. Come on. Oh, here we go. Flight Centre New Zealand, Expedia Australia. I don't know if you noticed, with the exception of the OTA, the online travel agency, all of our marketing, our collaboration has really been in conjunction with trade partners. And that's a philosophy that we both subscribe to. In all of our markets, our long-distance markets, where people have to invest in a flight in order to get here, we work at the travel trade as being our front line, as being our ambassadors. We do very, very little direct-to-consumer marketing. It's just not cost-effective. What we do is that we work with the Myers and the Virgin Holidays and so on of this world, who are in turn reaching out to their customers. So we'll have in the market at any point in time 40-odd campaigns that are all being driven by our trade partners. And these are tour operators, wholesalers, agencies that we collaborate with. It's a good use of our money. They're an important ambassador for us. They can extend the impact of our investment by adding extensions onto the campaign. And obviously, they're a really important conduit in terms of getting results. How effective were we? They can actually tell us the number of room nights that are getting booked into our respective destinations. So they really helped for me to demonstrate ROI on our campaigns. Media, our media teams work together very closely, and you usually see stuff like this, where there's a 2-page spread in this piece on Vancouver, followed by a 2-page spread on Whistler. So again, you have that 1-2 punch. Why do we do this? Because we realize that Whistler adds to the appeal, to the luster of Vancouver, and vice versa. We do 1 million cruise passengers who go on a cruise to Alaska from Vancouver every year. And one of the common complaints from them is that if I had known that Vancouver was here before I got on my boat, I would have stayed here longer. But the reality is that they were focusing on Alaska, and Vancouver's just a place to get on a ship. So we can reach out to them in advance and talk to them about Whistler and talk to them about Vancouver and what there's to see and do. They will build itineraries around that. They'll build additional room nights around that. And obviously conferences like TED are helped enormously by being able to use the Whistler leverage. So there's in fact TED components. The TED conference that we won, we brought from Long Beach. It was done for the first time in Vancouver this year. We're hosting TED again next year. There was also a TED component in Whistler. And that was a big part of the allure in terms of being able to attract TED, bring them out of Long Beach. Who knew they were in Long Beach? Nobody. But what we're doing with TED is that we're positioning it as Vancouver being the home for the TED conference. Provocative, thoughtful, innovative. It's a good connection. Okay, Vancouver and Whistler in China. Why China? Because China now is our second largest international market after the United States. And we get more direct flights from China to Vancouver than to any other city in North America, to any other city. So more flights to Vancouver than to San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, Toronto. But if you had to look at the profile of who is coming from China to Vancouver, the reasons they're coming are very different than what you might think. They're coming because of investment opportunities. They're coming because of potential immigration opportunities. They're coming because they're looking for education alternatives for their kids. Canada, as a vacation destination, is way down the scale. One of the reasons for that is it took us, we were the last, I think, Western country to get approved destination status. You need approved destination status from China in order to start marketing in China. So we were active in China since 2003, working with the trade and media and building relationships and building the critical mass to sell Vancouver. But we could not actually market in China until 2010, when we got approved destination status. So by then, we're chasing 137 other countries that are already very active in the marketplace. And we were frustrated because we found that it was tough to get them to pay attention to a Vancouver message when there's so many other competing messages. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the approach that we took in China, because we haven't done this anywhere else. It's kind of novel, and so much of it depended upon us building a relationship with a very unique individual. But here's an example of the partnership. We've actually invested in collateral together, where we're focusing on itineraries for the Chinese collaboratively, and we both underwrote the cost and distribution of this. We invested in a trade campaign where this is an online training program for travel agents in China, and they become Vancouver specialists. And there's a series of modules, and you probably can't see that from back there, but Module 1 is the Vancouver basics, and then there's top activities, unique markets and experiences, and then day trips and extended itineraries. And this is all about introducing Whistler and the regions. And then finally, luxury experiences. So all of this is in Chinese. It takes about 3.5 to 4 hours to complete, and people do it voluntarily. And when they complete it, then two things happen. One is they're really well positioned to be an ambassador for us in terms of selling Vancouver. And secondly, we find a whole bunch of ways to stay close to them. We treat them like gold card customers. We find various incentives and so on to keep them excited and passionate about wanting to sell Vancouver. This is the unique individual. I was sitting down with an agency in Beijing, and you will not have heard of this person, I guarantee it, but I was sitting down with an agency in Beijing, and we were saying, what can we do that's non-conventional to try to create a connection with the Chinese consumer? We're not interested in group tours from China. We wanted to go after the individual traveler from China, the affluent, sophisticated Chinese who's already been to Milan, who's already been to London, who's already been to Australia, and might be looking at an opportunity to come to Vancouver, if we could make a connection. But we can't do that conventionally because we don't have the muscle in terms of our buying power to push out the other guys that are investing in that market. They'd asked me if I'd ever heard of Chu Wanting, or Wanting Chu, and I'm butchering the name, I apologize, but Wanting Chu is the closest I can come to it. Wanting Chu is a young lady who came to Vancouver when she was 16 years old. And she went to school in Vancouver, and she started publishing and singing her own songs. And she contracted an agency, and the agency apparently represented Avril Lavigne and Sarah McLachlan. And the agency fell in love with her music, and they started publishing it through their Asian channels, particularly in Hong Kong. So fast forward, there was a very successful Chinese movie in Hong Kong that two screenwriters were writing a sequel to. And in the process of writing a sequel in a coffee shop in Hong Kong, they heard her music being played over the soundtrack. So long story short, they lifted 3 of her songs from her album, put it into their new movie. It was a hit. And so virtually overnight, this young lady went from being an unknown to being an enormous celebrity in China. And when I caught up with who this person was, she had won 20 awards in China, including the best songwriter, including the best original score. Her album had gone triple platinum. She had performed at 20-odd concerts, and she had been invited to be featured in the Chinese New Year's Gala, which is televised, and it is the most televised event in the world. And I'd never heard of her. And most of Vancouver had never heard of her. And I approached her agency and I asked, would she be interested in being our tourism ambassador? Because I wanted to do a series of videos that would be through the eyes, Vancouver through the eyes of Wanting Chu. And unbeknownst to me, Vancouver was a city she was extremely passionate about. As she later told one of the editors of one of the magazines, all of her albums, all of her songs are about Vancouver. You won't hear Vancouver in the lyrics, but the way she puts it is that she draws her inspiration for all of her music from Vancouver. That's pretty cool. So anyway, we formed a relationship. She was absolutely over the moon about being able to work with us, and we were catching a meteor. We were catching somebody who was on the beginning of a really meteoric rise in terms of her career. And it's only gone from good to better for her, which I can talk about later if I have time. Long story short, we did a whole bunch of things. We did a contest, we did travel for 4 days, 5 nights, which we're actually bringing the winners to this year for travel to both Vancouver and Whistler. We did a series of videos that had Vancouver and area positioned through the eyes of Wanting Chu. These are the themes that we focused on: nightlife and culture, culinary experiences, health and lifestyle, luxury shopping, summer vacation, and winter adventure. And winter adventure was all about Whistler, because they were our partner, and they were the hook. This is an example of the website that we did in China, our air partner. And if we're lucky, this is not going to be of the production quality of what you saw with respect to the great piece from Andorra or the Swiss video that you saw the day before. This is only for web, but the formula is the same for all of these. We have voiceover from the actress who's unscripted, and she's talking about what she thinks of this place. She's sharing her sentences. We include B-roll from in the Whistler, that we have rights to in China. So if we can we... It's in Chinese. I don't expect it to be translated.
识一下这边的 ski 和雪板 snowboarding。如果你没有准备好的话，一定要找滑雪老师、教练，或者是找比较有经验的朋友们，带着你去滑。滑完雪呢，你可能累了，然后想坐下来休息，吃个饭呀，喝点酒呀。那我建议大家去Whistler 有一个叫 Barefoot Bistro， 然后特别的好吃。Barefoot Bistro 的 owner 说要教我用刀去开香槟酒的盖儿，然后讲了一下这个背后的故事，就是为什么就是我们这块有这个习俗，然后所以我在试的时候我就会很担心，我说千万不要全碎了，然后我就把这个香槟酒的那个瓶打开了，特别好，然后觉得大家可以去那儿尝试一下。雪山上面，你从高处往下望的时候，你就会感觉到心旷神怡，然后觉得站在世界的顶峰的感觉。
Okay, now I'm going to see if I can get past this. No, we don't want that. There we are. There's always, it seems to be the trend, is that you put on stuff after the credits. People are looking for the little intimacies, and she's singing a song to the dog, and I thought I wouldn't share that with you. It's getting too personal. She's not a skier, but she loves the destination, she loves the product. She goes there for yoga and spa and what have you. And they were actually in an ice locker where they do the shots, the vodka shots, where they actually give you the parkas and the boots so that you're nice and snug, and all you have to worry about is drinking. So I thought that particular video was a big hit. It had that neat combination. You had somebody who already was a celebrity, who's got 2 million fans in China. She had a dog. I think Martin the other day was saying if you put sex or dogs or small animals into a video, it's a good way to create a connection. This one did. We had over 1 million views for this one in less than a month, which was pretty interesting. So how'd the program do? Overall, we got 20 million clicks on the travel contest. The videos that we actually had were the most played videos in the history of Youko in terms of videos from Canada, ever. Now, Youko is the Chinese equivalent of YouTube. You can't get YouTube in China. They have their own version. It's called Youko. So all this stuff's on Youko. As a matter of fact, the top 6 search, and when you search for Canada, the top 6 subjects that come up are all related. 5 of them are related to our videos, which is interesting. We now have the #1 most followed social media account on Vancouver and British Columbia. We have more fans that are following Vancouver on our website in China than any other destination, with the exception of the federal government, the Canadian Tourism Commission, and Tourism Alberta, which is a provincial body. This was unexpected. We got lots of leverage with high-end magazines. National Geographic from China called because they wanted to do a photo spread on Màrqueting and were interested in the relationship with Vancouver. We were more than happy to accommodate them. We ended up with getting exposure from them in 2 magazines. One was 12 pages on Màrqueting Chu and following her around Vancouver and Whistler, and the other one was a 4-page spread on cuisine. Because who would have thought? They found out that we've got the best Chinese food in all of North America. And they came and they wanted to explore our restaurant scene. So that was a real unexpected side benefit. Also Cosmo, Vogue, and we got leverage. We had huge leverage with the City of Vancouver. The mayor's office took advantage of the relationship when he did his mission to China. We had the Asia Pacific Foundation that actually featured Chu Wanting and some of the stuff they were doing. We had conferences that wanted her to be with them and so on and so on. We also had the Chinese consulate in Vancouver, who, when they were hosting dignitaries from China, wanted to introduce them to Chu Wanting, because she is a hit. I brought signed CDs from her for one of my trade shows, and my goodness gracious, I was expecting maybe 80 or 90, and we went through 500 in less than 2 hours. And finally had to put a stop to it. And these are trade shows. We're used to this at consumer shows. We don't go to consumer shows, but you don't usually see that kind of behavior at trade shows. It surprised us. Weibo. Weibo is the Chinese equivalent of Twitter, for want of a better choice of words. We had a fan base going to our website of about 25, 30,000. In the span of 7 months, that had grown to over 110,000. we saw a 277% increase in participation. And there's been very little attrition. This is the more important statistic. In terms of people who are actually sharing information about Vancouver and Whistler, we started from a base of about 60,000. We saw a 205% increase by December of people who are reposting information. So we take stuff from our blogs, from our respective destinations, and we translate it into Chinese, and we push it out through our social media channels in China. And it's gotten picked up because we've got people now who are curious, they're interested, they're excited about what they're seeing through somebody else's eyes that they can identify with. And they want to know more about the destination. They're candidates for future trips. In terms of what did we actually see relative to bookings in Vancouver, this is us, Vancouver in the dark blue, compared to the rest of Canada. Typically, we share the business 50-50 with the rest of Canada. So when I look at 2011, for example, we had about 120,000 overnight Chinese coming to Vancouver, and the rest of Canada got about 120,000 as well. There it is there. Okay, 2012, much the same. We have about the same, we have more air capacity, but Toronto is a draw as well. Montreal is a draw as well. We're competing with the rest of Canada for our share of the market. 2013, we broke away from the pack, which is interesting. Now, I can't give credit for the campaign for doing all of this, but without question, it had an influence. Without question, we picked up a significant chunk of share at the expense of Eastern Canada. Our Vancouver Specialist Program, this was another unexpected benefit. We started from a base of 90 certified agents in the end of last year. We went up to over 350 agents by the end of 2013 because, again, the travel community was interested in this person. So we had consumer activity that was generating demand for Vancouver and Whistler, and we had a trade that was now receptive to understanding how to better sell. So we really hit the sweet spot with this. Chinese to Whistler. Whistler is starting from a very small base, and it was difficult to convince the hotels in Whistler to get on side with focusing on China, but they did, to their credit. This is, I've broken it out because we're interested in summer activity. So this, in fact, this is summer in the red, 2011, 2012. 2013, they saw a 46% increase in summer business. In winter, 2011, 2012, 2013, they saw a 53% increase in winter business. So a good base for Whistler. They've seen an increase in the winter in terms of where they're really focused in terms of their yield, but they also saw a lift in terms of the summer business. One of the other unexpected side benefits is that many of the companies that we started to qualify in China who are interested in pushing business to Vancouver and Whistler were also starting to focus on the ski niche. And for China, it is a niche market. But a niche market in China is a big market. So Whistler is just thrilled. They're actually looking at doing sidebar campaigns with agencies in China that are exclusive to skiers, which is very interesting. So is Whistler happy? Yes, Whistler's happy. We're embarking again on a more ambitious campaign this year in 2014. We've just signed a contract with this agency. She actually has two agencies, one in China, one in Canada. They've both agreed to allow us access to her again. She's doing a 20-city concert series in China. She's doing a 20-city concert series in North America. We've got a very, very narrow window where we're going to actually work with her again. We're looking at a more ambitious campaign. We're looking at an increased amount of spend. But we're really excited. And this is really unique. I don't know if we could get away with this anywhere else. I don't think we would have found that combination of factors that just made this all work. So this is about perspective. This is cross-marketing. And this is tough, perhaps, to see, but this is a slide that I really like. And it's a slide that NASA did, a nighttime composite. And every little speck of light there represents, to me, a potential market. It also represents, I think, a potential competitor. And anything that you can do as a destination to add luster, that adds appeal to you as a destination, gives people more reason to visit you as a stepping stone, perhaps, to other kinds of experience. That's important. And that's why I think cross-marketing for Vancouver and Whistler makes a lot of sense, and something I see ourselves doing a lot more of well into the future, because we're responding to an appetite for exciting new destinations. And I think that's what we can put on the table for a potential consumer. Collaboratively, we can make our speck of light perhaps just a little bit brighter. There's my email address if you want to chat with me. I'm looking forward to the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. It's a great presentation. Cross-marketing. So we have seen a very direct example, and it works. So we can see that really it works. We don't have much time left for questions and answers, but we will leave a little bit of space. Actually, I have one question for you, Steve. So you do these kind of activities with Whistler, or you also do with other resorts around?
This level of activity, am I still on? This level of activity we do just with Whistler in terms of the intensity. We actually are looking this year at we're broadening the Chinese relationship by bringing in Banff as another community that we're partnering with, in addition to Whistler and Victoria. Because we know that Banff is a bit of an icon destination in China, and we were surprised that our communities were willing to allow us to go down this route, because we did this in consultation with them. But we're actually connecting the Vancouver-Banff experience with luxury terrain service. So we're introducing a new niche product in China, and we're introducing a broader concept of us as the gateway to not only to Whistler experiences, but also to in-mountain experiences in Banff, which is another province entirely in Alberta. In other markets, we will collaborate often on a one-off basis with other destinations in response to how the travel trade tells us their customers are traveling. So if we're working with an agent, for example, who is actually sending people from Vancouver to Toronto, then that's a basis for Toronto and Vancouver to get together and say, okay, so how can we actually campaign together to elevate both of our destinations?
Okay, thank you. Is there any question from the audience that you would like to raise? Please.
Thank you for these two brilliant interventions on a very difficult and new topic. I just have a short topic for you, Mr. Kim. Do you also have behind, in the hinterland of Ulsan, do you also have, you mentioned the hiking club. That was new for me. That's very important, 18 million people hiking and all these trails. Do you also have any winter activities? That's one question to you. And to Stephen, I have a question. Do you think that the example of Vancouver, can it be imitated? Is it a model for others? Or do you profit from the fact that you have a Chinese community in Vancouver? Because your knowledge of the Chinese market is amazing. For me, it was new that, in fact, the Chinese do not do only leisure tourism, they always have something in their head. So they come because for education, for other reasons, for feeling the ground. Do you think that it's unique, or could you imagine you are a professional, you are on front stage? Is this a model for others?
I'm not sure if I'm going to answer your question, but my philosophy in terms of marketing is that good research leads to good marketing. And in all of our markets, we need to understand the consumer, and we need to understand how he or she thinks and how they contemplate making a trip and where we are on the radar screen. And in some cases we're in mature markets where it's a question of reinventing ourselves. In other cases, we're in markets where we're seen as a stereotype. The Canadian market, believe it or not, is one of our toughest markets because people think they already know Vancouver, and trying to tell them otherwise is a challenge because you have this perceptual block where they just are not prepared to accept new information. So oftentimes new markets are an opportunity for us to tell our stories and see almost immediate growth because there is more of a willingness to believe the positioning before they start to actually check for themselves. A couple of themes came up that I thought were as important in the last couple of days, and one is people expect us to be cheerleaders. So I don't know if that translates well, cheerleaders, pom-poms, whatever. You know, they expect us to be biased in terms of our messaging about Vancouver. I find that social media allows us to reach into an audience of fans who are prepared to share their stories, and we can give them a platform to allow others to learn from them. So we didn't talk very much, and I'm not going to get into that, but the whole social community is really important for us for two reasons. One is that they act as ambassadors for us in terms of being able to position our destination in ways that we haven't thought of. And secondly, they come across as authentic and genuine in terms of their messaging. And I think that's true for all markets. And it's a question of just finding that sweet spot in terms of how to make the connection so that people, in fact, are prepared to share your stories. I don't want to belabor this, but I often liken a destination to a diamond. And a diamond in the rough, most of us wouldn't notice. It doesn't glisten at all. And it doesn't glisten until you actually put a face on it, until a jeweler, a craftsman actually carves a face on it. The more facets a diamond has, the more it glitters. And a destination, the analogy is that destination experiences are what make destinations glitter. And you have to use the market to help you understand what are the experiences that are relevant to me as a consumer. Not 5 years ago, but what are going to be relevant to me tomorrow that you need to aspire to. And then we need to play a role in terms of captivating the attention of